The principal theme that's emerged is one of alliances weakening. US-led or inspired alliances in the North Atlantic, in the Middle East, in the Asia-Pacific. It's interesting to note that all of these damage really has been self-inflicted rather than the actions of external forces. Burden sharing and benefit sharing has been a hot topic. The question of whether alliances have value, and leadership and unity have been in quite short supply.
The defection, in effect, or the at least fears about the defection of the United States from this liberal order that it did so much to create. And that's, I think, is the overarching question for the next couple of years, is how serious is this defection, and what is the reaction going to be, first and foremost, of American allies? I mean, is there a possibility for, the European Union effectively to carry the torch of global liberalism during this period?
All of this is happening in the context of external threats. So that's the sort of the Western part of this order. And the reason I think it's important going forward is that all of this that happened in 2016 and the first half of 2017 comes in the context of external threats to that order. So China, which is acting more assertively in its own neighbourhood, Russia, which is posing threats to the European security order. So as we look forward into 2018, the question is going to be both how are non-liberal and non-Western states challenging that order, and how are the weaknesses and tensions and disruptions of Western states undermining that order from within.
The Islamic State's caliphate is being weakened militarily, and the footprint of the jihadi organization is rapidly shrinking. That doesn't mean that the Middle East is entering a period of stabilization. To the contrary, all the new fault lines are emerging very powerfully and are causing political but also military unrest in Iraq, in Syria, and elsewhere. Iran is the primary geopolitical winner of those dynamics, but Russia is also positioned at the center of all these dynamics. So the potential for a conflict that would involve, for instance, Hezbollah in Israel, or Turkey and the Kurds in Syria or Iraq, is very high, and the coming year will probably be defined by those tensions.
The situation at the moment is still very tense, and there are ongoing tests, particularly of missile capabilities. North Korea flew a ballistic missile over Japan, which caused a lot of panic, understandably, within Tokyo. Looking forward to 2018, I think the key is to try and create some kind of coherent international policy response to this crisis. We've seen in 2017 a very fractured response, the US doing one thing, China disagreeing, and other Asian powers, South Korea and Japan, feeling increasingly panicked by the US alliance and its credibility in the region. So looking forward, I think the important thing will be some kind of coherent posture from all of those involved.
The nuclear deal assures that Iran does not develop a nuclear weapon for a specific period of time. This limited timeline is, of course, a major drawback. And I think the hope that the Obama administration had was that over time, based on the confidence developed over the course of negotiations, it would be able to engage Iran in all those other areas, its regional activities, and so on. And that, in turn, would be conducive to establishing some additional constraints on Iran's program after the provisions of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action sunset eventually. If the deal fails right now, it's quite possible that Iran would just go back to what it did before.
In terms of the great power relationships and the key player relationships that we're seeing in South Asia, what is emerging is a strong relationship among China, Pakistan, and Russia, which is in a way opposed somewhat to a strong relationship that is developing among the US, India, Japan, and Australia. What we expect to see clearly in the next few months is a greater attempt at structural relationship among these two different and possibly competing regional blocs.
There are increasing number of global challenges and trends which are transnational and supranational in nature and which need transnational approaches to confront. So the Paris Climate Change Agreement being a perfect example. This is a transnational issue and requires a transnational response. So the tension there is that populist and nationalist movements in nation states are reacting against the limits or the transfers of sovereignty involved in making such agreements. But if you want to combat challenges that are global in nature, you need that global approach and you need to pool and transfer sovereignty.